Hey everybody, well apparently we got a little bit of a problem with this camera. I don't know how it's looking to you at home. Let me try and check it out on my Facebook page, for which I will need eyeglasses. Anyways, it's good to be with everyone. Welcome. Nope, definitely either I have lost a lot of weight, at which I'll be sharing with you my diet secrets, or we have some setting wrong and we'll just survive it. Hopefully, you can handle a skinnier me. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just make sure I can put this on my other page. And by the way, we have another Facebook page called, let's see how, share now, share the messenger, share a page. We have another page called, well, Ron S. Cantor. And that's normally where we do these lives from. Some interesting, strange things going on with Facebook's algorithms. So we decided to do it from this page, my main Facebook page today. So I just shared it over there. Let me encourage you to share this as well. This is expert analysis. And by expert, I mean not exactly an expert. I'm just an Israeli American who kind of likes politics. So I'm going to share with you what I think after today's election. And if you have any questions, go ahead and just put them in the comments area, and I will try and take a look every now and then and answer them. So I want to make sure you can hear me. That's always the first question we ask. If you wouldn't mind, just kind of make a comment in there that you can hear me. That would certainly let me know that you can hear me. It's nothing worse than going 10 minutes into a broadcast and finding out folks can't hear me. Okay, I'm going to assume you can until somebody comments that you cannot. So today in Israel, we had Israeli elections, or what we commonly refer to as Tuesday, since they tend to happen so frequently. And the results are not official, but they're a little bit surprising. At the end of last week, or I'd say middle of last week, people were expecting. Everybody assumed that the Likud party, that is Benjamin Netanyahu's party, would win not the majority of seats, but would get the biggest share of the seats. Nobody ever wins a majority of seats in Israeli elections. You understand that? And the reason is, and we've gone over this many times, so I'll just zip through it real quick, is that in our crazy system of government, we don't vote for a prime minister. It would be a lot easier if we did. If we had elections for a Knesset, and then you had elections for a prime minister, and then that prime minister would win or not win. And you could even have 20, 30 people running for prime minister, and then you take the top two, and they have what is referred to as a runoff. And I still don't have any confirmation that you can hear me 3 minutes into this. So of the folks who are watching, if you just let me know, that'd be great. So what happens is you have the rewind. You have these parties that do not run for prime minister. Therefore, I got my train of thought back. They don't run for prime minister, and what happens is what we're going through right now. Now, if they did run for prime minister, and then you'd have a runoff or two candidates who would win the majority, even if it's well below 50%, then you'd have one person who won prime minister, and that one person would be tasked with forming a cabinet. Now, let me explain how it works right now. You have anywhere from 12 to 20 parties that are running for Knesset. They don't run for the prime minister; they run for the Knesset. And so what happens is that the party that gets the most seats, and that has typically been in the last 20 years, the Likud party, led by Ariel Sharon in the early 2000s, and then by Benjamin Netanyahu. Long story what happened with Sharon. He broke off and formed the Kadima party. And the Kadima actually was the largest party for a very short period of time. But it's been primarily the Likud party. But Likud, they never win a majority. No, nobody ever wins a majority. And then you have to not only form a government with 61 people, anywhere from 20 to say 40 who don't even like you. So you have to promise them stuff, but then you have to form your cabinet with people who don't like you. So your defense minister doesn't trust you. Your foreign minister doesn't trust you, and you don't trust them. It's not a great system. As opposed to looking outside the government for a foreign minister or outside the present government for a defense minister. You don't always have to promise it to somebody. And so what happens is we've been going through, it's really caught up to us, to haunt us in the last few elections, because we have such a wide spreading out of votes between typically 12 or so parties that there is no strong ruling party that can gather those around them. Now, the strongest party has been Likud, but why are we on our fourth election? Because Benjamin Netanyahu has not been able to convince other parties to stick with him. And if you want to know more about that, I would encourage you to go watch the video that we did the other day with Dr. Michael Brown, Asher Intrader, Dr. Dan Juster, and myself, where we talked about the Israeli system. Let's talk about today. You needed to know that so you can understand what happened today. So according to exit polls, and these are changing depending, they're not, when I first posted this a few hours ago, that was the only poll out. Now there's probably 2 or 3 other polls from the major networks in Israel. We have Channel 12, Channel 13, and then Channel 11, which is the public broadcaster owned by the country. So according to the Channel 13 exit polling, Likud shockingly won 33%. Now, as of last week, Likud was supposed to win roughly 28, 27 seats. Now, that's down from, I think, 36 in the last government. Now, why have they fallen down? Well, in the last year, there was a thing called the coronavirus. And depending on what day of the week it was, and I'm not being sarcastic here, people were thrilled with the way the Netanyahu government was handling the coronavirus, and then they were ready to crucify the Netanyahu government, or I should say the present Netanyahu government, on the way they were handling it. It constantly changed depending on what was happening in the country. So if you go back to the beginning, back in April, we were the first country, major country in the world to shut down our economy. And while that was difficult, it led to June opening up the economy and having very few coronavirus cases. Everyone's saying, Bibi's amazing. Who is like Bibi? King Bibi? He's unbelievable. We got 5 cases a day, 7 cases a day. But then it went up to 2,000 a day, and then 5,000 a day, and then people were, he doesn't know what he's doing, he's going to get, and it changed back and forth depending on what was happening with the virus. And as I think back, I'm in the States right now, but I was in Israel during the most difficult time last, I'm going to say, where we didn't know anything, April, May, June. It was really scary. And again, I personally, on a personal level, I walk in faith. I believe, I trust God. I'm not worried about the virus. I'm walking in victory. But as a nation, it was scary. I remember my daughter needed to go to the emergency room, and we're like, and we get there and they're like, don't come in here. Do not come in here unless you absolutely have to come in this room, meaning the emergency room. Do not come in here. So it was really eerie, and the streets were empty, and it was just I think of where we're at now. And again, it kind of hurts me because I can't feel Israel right now being in the U.S. And I've talked to a lot of my friends. And now the big controversy in Israel right now is not over the virus, but now the vaccine and the idea of a green passport, something you can pray for Israeli believers and Israeli congregational leaders and elders as they seek to pray and seek God, because they do not want the vaccinated and the unvaccinated to mingle together. So this has been very difficult for congregational leaders deciding, well, how do you have a meeting with, in the kingdom we're all equal, except we've got this issue of the virus, and then others might say of the vaccine, but the vaccine saving lives. So Israeli leaders are praying, seeking God, calling for unity. So that's something you can definitely pray about. So Netanyahu's popularity went up and down, but in the past week, it jumped up And again, forget what you or what I think about the vaccine. Maybe you're pro or anti. Let's not talk about that right now. But because of the job that he's done with the vaccine that most Israelis seem to approve of, he jumped up into the polls. Now, it could also be that there was some apathy from the left, which has all but disappeared. And we're going to look at the actual results here in just a minute. I'm just trying to give you a little bit of a background, and I hope it is helpful. Okay. So Netanyahu's popularity jumped up in the last week, and he, according to these polls, his Likud party has won 33 seats in this next government. If there's a government, if they form a government. And there are many who are already planning for the next elections, which if they don't form a government could be in the next half a year. So here's what happened according to this poll. And I'll go through another poll in a minute, but this is channel 13. Likud won. These are exit polls. These are not official results. And apparently we will not know those until Friday by Friday. And today's what? Wednesday night? Tuesday night. Okay, so Likud won 33 seats according to this exit poll. Yesh Atid 16 seats, and if you look, let me lean the other way. If you look behind me, you can see the 5 major players. So on the far, well, my right is your left. So on the far that way is Yair Lapid. His Yesh Atid party, there is a future, a centrist party, won 16 seats. Another poll says they won 18 seats. That's about what was expected. Again, Likud was supposed to win around 27, 28. They outperformed what they were expected. The joint list won 8 seats. Okay, now this is really interesting. The joint list, that is a group of 2 Arab parties, hence joint list. Your list is your party. And why do they call it a list? Because you have a list of people that if, for instance, you get 6 seats, the list, who are the first 6 people on those seats? They get seats in the Knesset. So they combine their list in order to have more power. Now, why would they do that? Because if they ran independently, like for instance, they got, 8 seats. Sorry. If they got 8 seats, that means that one party probably got 5 and the other got 3. Now, the party that got 3, if they had ran independently, would have gotten 0. You understand? You have to get at least 4 seats, which is 3.25% of the vote, to get any seats. So there's no such thing as getting 2 seats or 3 seats. It's either 4 seats or higher or no seats. Now that is very significant. Why? Because in the last few elections, they've gotten as many as 15 seats. Why did they drop down to 9? Because there were 3 parties that were with them in the past. And one of these Arab parties, called the Ram party, or Ra'am, they left. Why did they leave? Because for the first time, as an Arab party, and they're an Islamist party from everything I can read, but they're saying we are willing to work with a Israeli-led, Jewish-led government, whether it's Bibi or Yair Lapid. We are open to that. No Arab party has ever really been in serious negotiations to be in a government, as far as I know. And so this was a breaking of a departure from the norm in a big way. Now, why is that? Why would an Arab party say, I believe it has to do with the Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords, and again, if you don't know what that is the Trump administration reached out to several Arab countries, and they were able to arrange a peace deal with Bahrain, the UAE, and Sudan, and the fourth one, was it Oman? I'm not sure right now, but they were able to arrange, and then you've got others coming in to move the embassy in the former Yugoslavia, Kosovo, and is it Sarajevo? And these are Muslim majority nations that are making peace with Israel, and they've pretty much said, you know what? We're not going to wait any longer for the Palestinians to make peace with Israel, because I think this is Ron Cantor's analysis. I haven't talked to the Prime Minister of the UAE recently, but I think they said to themselves, the Palestinian leadership. Now, I'm not talking about the Palestinian people, but the leadership They don't want to make peace with Israel. They do not want to come to a peace agreement with the Jewish people. They like the status quo of war because they don't have to govern, and they don't have to be responsible for the unemployment in their territories. It's much easier to be at a pseudo war with Israel. So they got tired of waiting, and they said, all right, fine, we will make peace. And there was negotiated. And look at that. And I think some of these Israeli Arabs said, why don't we do that? I know that the mayor of Nazareth, an Arab city, is now actively looking to work with the Jewish government. And so that's an amazing development from the Abraham Accords. May that happen more and more. I pray it happens in the Palestinian territories, that they get a government that really wants peace, that really wants to work with Israel. That would be amazing. Okay. The Ram party, who broke off from the joint list so they could work with Israel, did not pass the 3.25 threshold according to this exit poll, which means they will get 0 seats. So what they did was a kind of a good thing for, at least in my view, they bring unity in the country and have more and more Arabs who want to work with Israel, because you may not know this, but 20% of Israel are Israeli Arabs. And for the most part, we get along. I'm not saying that all of them have Israeli flags in their house or they celebrate Jewish holidays, but I see Arabs all the time in Israel, and we're not arguing or fighting. I've been to Nazareth. I have great conversations with people. It is not what you think. Okay. Still with me? Keep going down the list here. So now you've got, so the joint list, that's the Arab coalition of 2 parties. They get 8 seats. Israel Be'itanu, that's Israel, our home, or our house. They get 8 seats. Now, there are several parties that are right-wing parties. They're natural allies with Benjamin Netanyahu, but they've said enough. We're not going to work. They don't trust him anymore. Now, if you've worked with Bibi, as another politician, a rival politician, then you've probably been wronged. He is a very skillful politician, but it's been 12 years. And so a lot of these guys, they don't trust him anymore. So and this is the root of why we can't form a stable government, because there is no more left wing. The left wing, the Labor Party did have a resurgence. We'll get to that in a minute, as well as the Merits. According to the exit poll, they got 14 seats, which is a lot. But the entire Israeli left is now 14 seats out of 120. Do you understand that? The entire Israeli Jewish left is down to 14 seats. The political landscape is a center-right landscape. That is Israel. That's our population. We are a right-wing country. And by right-wing, it doesn't mean, it's got such a bad connotation. It just means that we want security. We don't trust Iran. That's what it means. So, and I'm told I got a bad connection, and but you can hear me. Does that mean you can see me, but you can hear me? Okay, that's what I really want to know, because if you can't hear me, that's the problem. So let me know, folks, if you can hear me, okay or not. Okay, so now where are we at? We are at Israel Beitenu. That's one of the right-wing parties that will not work with Netanyahu anymore. And I would also say that for Yesh Atid. They're not a right-wing party, but when they were birthed as a party, they worked with Netanyahu. They were in the government, but they haven't been since. Under Israel Beitenu, you have Shas. They also got 8. Shas is an ultra-Orthodox party. Interestingly enough, the leader of the party, beloved by the masses, went to jail for 3 years for bribery. He also hates Messianic Jews, but he got out of jail and made a comeback, and he's been leading the party for over a decade now. They're an ultra-Orthodox party, primarily made up of Sephardic Jews, okay? Those are darker-skinned Jews from the Middle East, as opposed to lighter-skinned Jews like me from Eastern and Western Europe, okay? They will work with Bibi, and the reason they'll work with Bibi is because Bibi will give them what they want. And by the way, anybody who works with them, you're going to be blackmailed. That's the name of the game. Netanyahu likes to work with them because he knows that once he has appeased them, once that they get what they want and they join the government, they typically don't leave. But there is one issue that they are pretty strong on. They don't want their young men to serve in the army. And for the most part, most of the men do not work. Ultra-Orthodox Jews, not your typical Orthodox, modern Orthodox, they work, they go to have a job. But these folks feel like they're they need to study Torah all day. They need to recite the Psalms. And we believe that work is holy, that work is good, work is honorable. So let's continue to go here. So that Shas, they got 8 seats. Blue and white, you remember blue and white, that was Benny Gantz. Shockingly, according to this poll, he got 8 seats. That's a huge shock. Some didn't even expect him to break the threshold because what he did, some would say is unforgivable. Certainly, those in the Yesh Atid party would say it was unforgivable because in the last election, he joined with Yair Lapid, and they created the blue and white party, and they got the majority. Well, this is in the last few elections, but one of their core values was that they would not form a government with Bibi. And finally, after the third go around, Benny Gantz said, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and leave Yesh Atid, take my 17 seats, and I'm going to join with Bibi. And he's promised me that I'll be prime minister after a year and a half. He was the only one who believed that, if he believed it. And that's really why the government eventually came down. It became clear that Netanyahu never intended to relinquish power to him after a year and a half, and that collapsed the government. So shockingly, if these exit polls are right, he got 8 seats. I'm stunned by that. I thought he might be done for in politics for breaking his word. But then again, it's politics. People expect that, I get. Okay, now the Labor Party and the Meretz Party both got 7 seats, according to the exit poll. Labor, they are the traditional left-wing party. They're not as left-wing as they used to be. The new left-wing party is Meretz, but together they make up the left. Now, here's the interesting thing: is people thought that Labor was done, that Labor was just forget it. They disappeared. I think in the last election they didn't win any seats. And now they've come back to win 7. This is the party of David Ben-Gurion, our first prime minister. This is the party of Yitzhak Rabin. But again, Israel has moved to the right, and they've moved to the right a little bit, but not enough. But they've made a resurgent. They're back, and they've got 7 seats, as does the far left. And I have strong disagreements with the Meretz party, which means energy. They've got a lot of energy. I don't think they've got a lot of wisdom. And I think I'm grateful they're not in control of the country, but they got 7 seats, also surprisingly high. Now, here's the big shocker, and we've just got 2 more to go. The religious Zionist party, this was, I believe, 2 parties came together, which is 2 religious parties. One is considered, I think Ha'utzma, the strength party. They are power part. That's probably the better way to say it. They're considered by many to be basically a Jewish racist party. I'm not going to say what my opinion is because I'm here to give analysis, not to give them my opinion. But let me just say that I wouldn't be thrilled if they were in the government. I would not be happy at all if they were part of our government. They were outlawed for a very long time. And then in the last, I think the 4 elections ago, which was only 2 years, the judge ruled that they could serve, that they could run for Knesset. And so they would probably not have gotten any seats at all, but they joined with another religious Zionist party. And I can't even remember what they called it. It used to be called Our Home, and then these ones left, and they're back together. It changes so much. Anyways, they joined, and because they joined together, they got 7 parties. That means one of those parties wouldn't have broken the threshold. And if they'd split it, probably neither one of them would have made it into the government. And that would have been bad for Netanyahu because he's going to need those people to form a coalition. All right. And then the last party I want to talk about is the New Hope Party. The New Hope Party was birthed by Gideon Sa'ar, and this is really a shock. He was considered the number 2 guy in the Likud party. He did not get along with Netanyahu, And he had been waiting a long time to be prime minister. He got out of politics for a little bit, got back into politics in the Likud party, and him and Bibi, they don't get along. And he just finally said, I'm done. I'm going to form my own party. I'm going to take a bunch of Likud people with me. And he got 5 seats. So he's lucky that he broke the threshold. But he was polling just a few months ago at 20. He was the second highest, polling at the second highest, just under Likud. But, he was new, he was fresh, he was the new cool thing. And then people got to know him a little bit better, didn't like him. And that's that. So what does that mean? I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to let you go. I'm not going to keep you here much longer. Let me just tell you so that means if you add all those seats up, if you take the 33 from Likud, and then you add to that Shas, that's 8, so that would be 41. And then you add to that, I didn't mention Yamina. Very important. Yamina is, you can't really see him, a little blurry, but it's led by this guy, Naftali Bennett. Naftali Bennett was polling around 20 seats probably about 7-8 months ago. Why? Because he kind of formed like a shadow coronavirus commission. And he began to release, talking points and papers on what he would do if he were in charge of the coronavirus. He was asking the government to let him be, and he was making a lot of sense, and people were really liking him, and he was polling really high. But then he decided that he was not in the government. Even though his party's called the Yamina. What does Yamina mean? It means right, and that may look left to you because Facebook turns me around, I think. But that is the right-wing party. Yamina means right. He's a natural ally with Netanyahu, but he doesn't trust him anymore. Netanyahu has burned him too many times. They used to be partners. He was an aide to Netanyahu many years ago. And so he forms his. By the way, if you just take the leaders of the major right-wing parties, not named Likud and not religious, you've got Israel Beitanu, led by Avigdor Lieberman behind me. You've got Yamina, the right-wing party, led by Naftali Bennett. And then you've got Gidon Sa'ar, who leads the New Hope Party, the new one I just told you about, that only got 5 seats. These are all people that were super, super close to Bibi at one time and then feel that they got burned, and they swore they wouldn't work with him. So when the last government was formed, Naftali Bennett said, even though I'm a natural ally of Bibi, I'm not going to work with him anymore. I don't trust him anymore. And so he decided to go into the opposition. And so with that fact in mind, and with the fact that he formed this shadow coronavirus commission, he was very popular over the summer and was polling at 20 plus seats. But then he just said, you know what, I'm not going to rule out joining with Bibi. And then Israel rolled out the vaccine where I've heard 85% of our adult population has been vaccinated. That has been hugely popular in Netanyahu's favor. And thus, Naftali Bennett has fallen to 7 seats. Okay, so now let's do the math again. You still with me? All right, so we added up, wrong glasses, we added up Likud at 33. We're going to take the religious party Shas. They have 8 seats. That would give us 41. We're going to add to that United Torah Judaism. We forgot them as well. They're led by a guy who used to be our health minister, and he just does not look healthy. I wish I put a picture up for him. You know, he may be the healthiest guy in the world, but he just doesn't look it. And he's been in a lot of controversy for other things as well, shielding an accused pedophile from a religious Jewish woman from Australia who fled to Israel. Not a real popular guy. But his own party, they love him because sadly, in the religious parties, they'll just do whatever the rabbis tell them to do. They really don't think for themselves. And so Litzman, that's his name, his party, United Torah Judaism, so they got 7 seats as well. So you've now adding, we're going to do it one more time. 33 plus 8 is 41. And then you go down to the United Torah Judaism, that is 7. So that would be 48. And then you add to that the religious Zionism, that would be 6. That would be 56. That is not enough to form a coalition. Did I do that right? I think it's higher. Let's do it again. 33, I should have a calculator. 33 and 8 is 41. 41 plus 7 is 48. And then 48 plus 6 is 54. That's what I wanted to say. 54. So the pro-Netanyahu, I gave it two more seats. Maybe that was prophetic. We'll find out, because the polls are the polls are different. But on this poll, that's 54. What does that mean? It's not enough to form a coalition. What does that mean? It means we're going back to election, except Naftali Bennett has not ruled out joining with Bibi Netanyahu. And Naftali Bennett and his Yamina right-wing party, they're going to go into horse trading now, and he'll become what we call in Israel the kingmaker, meaning you may not have the largest party, but you've got the most important party, because without you, there is no government. So right now, and I think most of the polls would agree with what I'm saying right now, that Netanyahu did not, they're calling him the big winner. If you go to any of the Pages, Times of Israel, Jerusalem Post, Haaretz, they're all saying he won, and he did. Likud party got 33 seats. That was much higher than they expected. 5 or 6 seats more. Still not enough to form a ruling coalition, unless they're able to make peace with Naftali Bennett.